Good evening from the Gail Lemron Auditorium on the campus of Embry-Riddle. Welcome to the Embry-Riddle Speaker Series event. Our final event of the season features the longest running airman in U.S. history. 46 years our guest has served his country. He is the longest serving African-American in American military history as well. He has written a book tonight that we're going to talk about, Reflections of a Servant Leader. From humbling beginnings as the son of sharecropper parents, you'll get to know what leadership is and what perseverance is from a man who took a few knocks on the way up. He'll be signing copies of his book immediately following our discussion tonight. There will be a Q&A section with students and the general public. My name is Mark Bernier, and it is my great pleasure to welcome for the final event of 2019 spring season, Major General Alfred K. Flowers.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, General. The book arrived on Friday, and I spent the weekend reading it. And more than one occasion, my daughter heard me say, "You got to be kidding." And she said, "Dad, what is it?" And I said, "The story I'm reading is so incredible. Humble beginnings hardly covers it." You're the first person I've ever interviewed in all these years that was in a sharecropper family. And it was in North Carolina, where tobacco was king and still is for many families.
Still is for many, yeah.
General, what was it like? Share with our audience, what was it like? Because things that we take for granted on a daily basis today, you went without.
Absolutely. I experienced growing up some of the most serious deprivation that one could imagine. Social, environmental, financially, you name it, we had it. It was, as a child, to me, it was the only thing that I knew at the time. So as I watched what was happening, and I began to realize later as I became older that, man, there's something not quite right about that. So let me just tell you how this sharecropping thing worked and the formula that was used. The landlord owned everything. They would give you a house to live in, a very small house. They ran a country store. You go buy whatever you didn't raise there at the store. And when the harvest is taken in, the landlord got 50% up front. The other 50%, you paid for what it costs to produce the goods sold out of your 50%. So I recall summers my grandfather would come in after selling everything that we'd harvest and working all year, and he would say to my grandmother, "Well, I still owe the landlord $300. We had worked all year and still owed $300. That made an impression on me. And that impression was, there's got to be a better way. And I've got to get out of this environment. So my grandfather passed, had a heart attack, worked himself to death at 55. We were on a wagon unloading corn, and he started complaining about chest pains and thought he had indigestion. And it was a heart attack. 2 days later, he was deceased. So I said, man, I just watched him, helped as much as I could, and he worked himself to death and died at 55. I don't want to be that way. So when I graduated from high school, I asked my grandmother to sign for me to come into the service. I knew I didn't want to go in the Army because I had a relative that was in the Army, and he was always coming out of the woods from something. I said, "Oh, no, I don't want to do that. And, we catch rabbits in the woods. We don't live out there." But I had another cousin who was in the Air Force, and I kind of followed him to the Air Force.
And to back up for just a moment, if I may, General, your parents were teenagers. Your father was 16, your mother was 18?
Yes. My dad was 16, my mom was 18, and they got divorced shortly after I was born. Sometimes I wonder if I was the cause of their divorce, but I hope not. They were children themselves. So what does a 16-year-old do with an infant when they're 16 years old themselves? Well, for me, luckily, by the grace of God, they gave me to my grandparents to raise. And, you know, raising a child in that environment, for instance, you'll see in the book, but I came home from the hospital in a shoebox. I was premature, weighed less than 3 pounds, and my grandmother brought me home in a shoebox. And she used to sit up all night by an old wooden heater and feed that thing all night to keep me warm. I call that, you know, yesterday's incubator. It was a wooden heater and somebody rocking you to keep you warm. But, you know, we came out of that. And one of the things that, if I had to summarize this book in one sentence, I would say, you don't have to live where you're born.
Yeah. You had this wonderful desire to be in the Air Force. Mm-hmm. But at one point, you thought you were going to be an accountant, right?
I did. I had some interesting turns in the Air Force. When I came in, I was a supply warehouseman because I was right out of high school. Had gone to schools that didn't prepare me very well for much of anything. And, you know, when I tested the ASVAB test, the Armed Forces Entrance Exam for enlisted people, I didn't score that well, but I scored well enough to get into the general area. And general included things like supply, warehousing, food service, security forces, those kinds of general AFSCs. And that's where I started, in North Dakota as a warehouseman. But the day that I arrived there, I made up my mind that, you know what, I'm going to be the best warehouseman in this warehouse. And that's kind of the approach that I took, and never looked back.
You met your wife in the service.
I did. My wife was, she was a two-striker at Norton Air Force Base. I had just returned from Vietnam in 1969, and as fate would have it, we were working in the same building. And I was kind of shy and bashful, and I used to just walk the halls past her office and hope that, you know, she'd say, hey, come on in. And one of my buddies that was in Vietnam with me was stationed there also, and he said, hey, man, you want to meet that woman? I'll help you. I said, okay, how about that? Help me out. And
Cyrano de Bergerac.
He set up an outing, a bowling outing, and she and 3 of her friends, we met at the bowling alley.
But you didn't bowl.
I didn't bowl, didn't know how to bowl. I didn't even know what a bowling ball was. But that wasn't the reason I was there. I was there to try to impress that young lady, and it all worked out. And she stayed in the Air Force, good Lord, about 11 years. Got out and came back in 1971, when she was pregnant with our son. You couldn't have a baby in the Air Force, a lady couldn't, so they gave options. The options were you get out or you abort. And we said, no way, she's getting out. So she got out and was out for a year, and then in 1972 they changed the rules and says if you were married and had a child, then you could be on active duty. So she came back in and stayed 5 more years.
One of the things that impressed me so much, and you'll enjoy reading it in this book, is the decision you made to go to Crete with her.
Yes.
She was transferred to Greece, and you had to make a tough decision.
I had to make a tough call. I was just finishing up my bachelor's degree, and I had applied for officer training school and been selected. And she had an assignment to Crete, and we had a 4-year-old son. So the options that I was given is, look, you can go to Crete with your son and your family, your wife, or you can go to OTS, but we can't assure you that you're going to get to Crete as an officer. So we made the decision that we were going to Crete as a family, and this other stuff would work out somewhere along the way. So went to Crete, stayed 2 years, got a master's degree, applied for OTS again while I was there, none selected. Applied a second time, none selected. And then I said, well, you know, maybe this medical services corps, direct appointment stuff with a master's degree and a business background might be the way to go. Well, I got 2 non-selections there, 2 rejections. And the rationale was that I had over 10 years enlisted service, and the experience had been prior service folks that just want to get 10 years and retire as an officer and then go make a lot of money doing something else. So I was turned down again. So then I started working on a doctorate at USC, and my wing commander there at that time, he said, after I got the 5th rejection letter, my boss made an appointment to go see the wing commander, took me with him, and he says, sir, I don't understand this. Now, here's a guy with a master's degree working on a doctorate, been in for 13 years and can't get commission. I don't know who he talked to or what he said, but about 2 weeks later, we got a message that said, you've been accepted. And I was off to San Antonio, the officer training school.
I never realized just how vast San Antonio was for the military. I mean, the military supported that community. And you've been to Texas several times in your life.
Yes, sir.
Back.
We were stationed there 4 times before we moved back to retire there. It's affectionately known as Military City, USA. And it is Military City, USA. I was talking earlier, there are over 300 retired general officers in San Antonio. Over 300. And the largest military medical facility in the Department of Defense now is in San Antonio, the San Antonio Military Medical Center. 13,000 people. They have 34 operating rooms. So folks that think that Bethesda and Walter Reed is the hub of military medicine, used to be, not anymore. And they've got a world-class burn center there, world-class. And then the Center for the Intrepid, where we are rehabilitating those that are wounded in combat. They go there and they get rehabilitated, and a lot of them come back on active duty, and some of them get medically retired. But it's a military mecca.
I want to take you back to the time in Vietnam. You're in Da Nang. You're there
Yes,
for,
sir.
what, a little over a year, sir?
A year.
And it didn't take long for you to feel the impact of firepower. I think it was like your first or second day.
First night. We landed at night, and the place was under a rocket attack. So they got us to the tent, and when I got to the tent, everybody was running. So I didn't know where to run, so I just followed. And we ran in a bunker. And that was my introduction to Vietnam. In 1968 at Da Nang Air Force Base, you could almost set your watch to the sun, because when the sun go down and it get dark, rockets start to come in. We'd have rocket attacks almost every night. And we had so many of them till after a while, you just slept in your helmet and your flak jacket with an M16 at your head, and you wake up in the morning, you got shrapnel in the bed, you know you had a rocket attack. You just slept through it.
You were there for the Tet Offensive, right?
All 5 of them in 1968. And I had another very unique experience in Vietnam. My first 5 months, I was assigned to an aerial mobility team, and basically all we did was haul bodies out of the jungle every night. So when I go to the Vietnam Wall in DC, there are names on that wall that I remember the tag on the body bag and the transfer cases from. Young 18, 19-year-old Army Marines airmen.
You moved 22 times?
24 times we moved.
24 times.
Yeah.
And by the time it was set for retirement, which was 2012, I think?
Yes, sir.
You were ready.
I was ready. My wife was more ready than I was. She said, well, Flowers, you know, we're going to retire, and we're going to San Antonio. And I said, okay. So we went to San Antonio and bought a house. Came back to D.C., and my boss called me, and he says, hey, Al, the White House is calling about you, and they want to know if you would consider a political appointment. And I said, where? Doing what? And I said, well, of course, in Washington, D.C. And my wife said, you can stay. You can just send the check to Texas, because I'm going to Texas. I am done here. So I turned down the first one. The first one was Undersecretary for Management for the Department of Veterans Administration, and I said no. A few months later, they came back with the same one again. They were burning them out about every 6 months, and I said no again. And then they came back with an OPM, deputy at OPM, and I said no again. And that time, the HR folks from the White House said, well, you know, the president's probably going to want to talk to you. I said, well, tell me when I need to come see him, and I'll be there. Never heard anything else from them. But, yeah, it was, we had had enough.
You took a job in the private sector, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Consultancy? Tell us about that.
Started as a consultant for an IT and engineering company in 2013 after the year cooling off period in the military, where you can't represent back to the same service for a year. The ethics regs prohibit that. So at the end of that year, I took a job as a senior consultant for an IT and engineering company and did that for about a year and a half. And one day we were at lunch, the CEO and I, and he said, hey, Al, you know, that COO job is open. Would you consider that? So I said, sure, I'll consider that. So I took that job and worked it for about 2.5 years. And a year and a half ago, I gave it all up because I was having some serious health problems. I had a heart ablation, atrial flutter, AFib. So, you know, I decided that I think I need to smell the roses before somebody put them on me.
You tell a story about how it was the holidays, and you climbed a ladder, and I think you fell?
I was putting up a Christmas decoration inside the house, and had my back turned to the steps, missed a step coming down, and fell onto the floor and severed the patella tendon in my left knee. I knew something bad had happened when I heard it pop, and I couldn't get up. And my wife was out, and so I just kind of crawled around the house until she got home, and we went out to the hospital, and the orthopedic said, well, you know, the surgeon that ought to do your work is with the military Olympic team. He won't be back until the 20th of December. This was on the 10th. And I said, okay. So they kind of braced me up and put me all kind of medicine. And on the 21st of December, I went in for surgery. And I spent Christmas recovering.
And that's why, the reason I mentioned it was, General, you've always made the most of even the smallest things. This gave you and your wife time to rebond, because you just, as you put it in the book, you just hung out in your pajamas.
We did, all day Christmas Day. We never got out of pajamas, and we just got reacquainted after all those years of me being someplace else at Christmas or about ready to go someplace else. And this time we were together in the house, just us, and I couldn't get out. Neither did I want to get out, but that's kind of how that turned out for us.
You opine in your book about the importance of balance in your life with family, travel, service. You had the calling to serve your country. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. People could always second guess. I think you said you would have liked to have spent a little more time at home. I was reading you were working at one point as many as 80 hours a week.
Yes, sir. And I missed a lot of soccer games and basketball games. Our son was a basketball player, and I regret a lot of nights staying in the Pentagon until late at night and missing his basketball games. I think work-life balance is extremely important. It's easier said than to do if you're a professional. We all know what's right, but we do what the mission requires. But, you know, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do it the same way. There were sacrifices that I made for the sake of mission that I should have been making for family. So yeah, it worked out okay.
Yeah. Look how your son turned out.
It could have turned out the other way. We're very fortunate.
Share with our audience about your son. I know how proud you are of him. Alfred K. Flowers III, I think.
Well, there's the junior and the third.
Okay.
Yeah, our son, he was a Division I college basketball player who thought he could do ROTC and play basketball in a Division I at the same time and major in finance. So it took him about 2 months to figure out that he couldn't do all that stuff because he didn't have the time. He gave up the ROTC, and we had one edict with him, and that is, you got to major in something that you can make a living at. You're not going to major in communication, basket weaving, underwater bubble blowing, or any of that easy stuff. So he took the advice, majored in finance, and just as he was finishing, he went on to get his master's degree at the same institution. And as he was about to complete his master's degree, he called me one day and said, "Hey, Dad, when you going to come commission me?" And I said, "Commission you in what? What you going into?" He says, "Well, I'm coming into the Air Force." He had a job offer with West Jersey Medical Center as a hospital administrator, making about 3 times what the Air Force was going to pay him as a second lieutenant at that time. And he elected to come into the Air Force. And not one time did we ever say, "This is what you ought to do." It was his choice. So he came in as a hospital administrator, first lieutenant. At the 17-year point, I pinned 06 on him, full colonel. So he's been a colonel now for about 4.5 years, and he's the med group commander of the second largest hospital in the Air Force at Nellis Air Force Base.
What was the weigh-in from Mrs. Flowers on that, when your son decides to do that? Did she weigh in?
She did, but she weighed in on the same side because she's retired Air Force also. And, our thinking was it wasn't too bad for us. And we both came from some pretty bad backgrounds. And it turned out okay, so it would probably work for him too. But I talk to him about every day. And some days I have to be real with him and tell him, "Look, you're airman ordinary like all of us. Don't start feeling too good about yourself because there's someone else that doesn't feel that way." And so far I think he's listening. We never know for sure.
I know the audience is going to be a little curious that in the 60s, did you have to go through the pains of desegregation, segregation in the Air Force?
Absolutely. When I do audiences like this in speeches, I always ask about, desegregation in the 60s. And my answer to that is the people that come into the service come out of society. If they grew up and acquired that kind of mentality, they didn't leave it when they went to the induction station. They brought it with them. Now, the services do a remarkable job on educating. We used to have a program that was called a race relations program, and everybody had to go to it and go again and again and again. I didn't think it was going to ever end. But the thing that helps the military, I think, is the education program that we have, and the fact that we instill in people that you all need each other, and a bullet doesn't have a race, a color, or a gender. If it hits you, you may die, just like everybody else. So you learn to protect your buddy and appreciate your battle buddy, but it's a lot better today than it was in 1965 when I showed up at North Dakota. We used to have race riots in the dining hall. Yeah.
You impressed me with other things. Here you are, a commander. You're working a lot of hours. You have people under your command, yet you would work alongside them. You would come back at night. You brought them food. You kept them with coffee. You would serve people who were serving you. Yeah. Was that instilled into you by your grandmother?
Some of it was in the early formative years, was from my grandparents. But in the later years, I think the thing that instilled even more in me, the fact that I served 13 and a half years as an enlisted person. So I understood what enlisted people go through, and because I've been one. And I'm one that believes that if you're going to lead, you ought to lead from the front, not the rear. So when I'm asked, how do you tell if you're a leader? It's an easy answer. Who's following? If nobody's following, you're probably just taking a walk. So.
You, in this book, you describe, and we're going to take questions from the audience shortly, so start thinking about what you'd like to ask General Flowers. There's a difference in leading in the military and leading in the private sector. You dedicate a whole chapter to that.
Yes.
Could you share with our audience a couple of the high points?
A couple of the high points are in the military, we don't have to compete for dollars like we do in society and the corporate world. It's the bottom line. The financial statements, what kind of rules the roost. And also in the military, we have a great discipline program. When a recruit come out of Lackland or one of the other services recruiting, they aren't the same person they were when they went in, because a lot of discipline has been instilled in them. In private industry, what I found, and that's why I waited to write the book after I'd spent some time in private industry, I think the thing there is there are a lot of bright people like the ones here. But sometimes we don't appreciate those bright people because we think they are millennials and so different. Well, they are different. We're all different. And difference is a good thing. So I think it's an issue of respect. If you show them that you respect them, trust them, and train them and let them do their job, get out of the way, you'll be amazed at what will happen for you.
How did you handle defeat, temporary defeat, in your heart, to get up and try again? You got knocked down a few times from testing. In this book, you actually say you questioned your own life, where you were going to go. Maybe this is not meant. What did you lean on to get you to the next rung?
Well, I was raised in a family of faith, and I'm a believer, and I knew that knockdowns were not knockouts. You get knocked down, you get up and try again. And it's determination and the motivation, the willpower to do better is what was driving me.
Some of the people in our audience are going to be leaders themselves one day, students there. And you stress the importance of listening. In 3 acronyms in your book, you talk about the importance of listening.
Yeah, it's very important. I talked a little bit about it today. Listening is so important because you can hear what people have in their heart. What comes out of the mouth comes from the heart. If you're not listening attentively, you might not hear what someone is really saying if you're not listening. So I think it's extremely important that you listen, and not just listen and stare, but listen to get a better understanding and appreciation of who that individual is. And everyone is an individual, all different. I don't know how you can figure that out, and by running your mouth all the time, you need to listen very carefully to people.
General, when you would move to a new command or a new assignment, was it part of your work assignment that you would do one-on-ones with those right below you? Would you try to have as many one-on-ones as possible, the size of what they are as people first?
Well, I believe in leadership by walking around. I think if you're a leader and you're tied to your desk and a computer, there's something happening in your organization that you don't know about. And the way you find out about it is you get out, walk around, see what people are doing. I used to walk around and pull up a chair next to people working, and they would get so uncomfortable. They'd start squirming, and the chairs would start moving, and say, hey, look, what's the problem? I'm just trying to figure out what you're doing so that I can maybe enable you to do it better. But that's the thing that I valued the most, was getting out where the people are and understanding what they were doing. Now, they were doing a lot of stuff that I couldn't do, but but I had some understanding of what they were doing. And when I was in meetings with more senior folks and I needed to make sure that they were supported, I had a better understanding of how we support them.
You did demonstrated acts of appreciation to people, like even writing little notes. You know, they did a good job, they completed their assignment. That went a long way. Some of the people under your command thought that that meant as much to them as a raise, because they were acknowledged by their commander that they did the job.
Folks want to know that they're appreciated, and they want to know that you trust them and that you appreciate the job that they're doing. And you know, I've got an acronym. Actually, it's a word. It's an anagram, and the anagram is HEART, H-E-A-R-T. And to me, I relate that to humility, because I don't know many people that want to be around someone that's arrogant. E is enthusiasm. You ought to have passion for what you're doing. A is attitude. It's all about attitude. Just think of who you know with a bad attitude that you want to be around. Not many, not any in my case. And the T is trust. Heart, H-E-A-R. R is respect, T is trust. You got to respect, you got to trust. Humility is a big player. Attitude is a big player.
You also write about being ethical, and that's something we, again, take for granted. But you have to lead from the top. If you want people to be ethical, you have to show
Absolutely.
ethical.
If folks see that you're doing the wrong things, they think they can do the wrong thing, and it's okay because you're as the leader doing it and they see it. And I tell you, ethical and integrity are major components of successful careers in the military. You know, the integrity piece is, you know, doing the right thing even when no one is watching, because it's the right thing. And the ethical thing is doing the right thing. It's so interrelated with integrity that you get your ethical values sometimes get challenged. And folks will say, look, you know, we can do this, right? I said, yeah, but we can do it, but there might be some legal implications here that you may not fare so well afterwards. So you just got to have the determination to do what's right. I never told a commander no. If there was something that I couldn't do that was legal, I would say, sir, or ma'am, we can do this, but there are consequences. And usually they would say, I don't want to do it. If there's something illegal about it, unethical or immoral, let's not do it. So.
You also stress sincerity, and this is something that is lost on a lot of people, that if you are not sincere when you address and interact with those under your command, they'll spot it, and they start playing games with you, right, General?
Folks know when you're just blowing smoke. You know, the power of thank you is one of the things I talk about sometimes. The power of thank you, when you really mean it, is amazing. It will do a lot for you. But for someone to just run around and shake hands and thank everybody like they got on a thank you tape, they figure it out pretty soon and say, here's a phony that we're dealing with. They don't really mean that. Then they don't trust you. Then they don't respect you. And then they don't want to do the work. So it's a death spiral from a leadership perspective.
Have you ever come into a situation in which someone under your command wouldn't be able to do it? It was a legal task, it was a task they should be able to do, but for some reason they couldn't do it. What as a general do you do?
Well, you respect the fact that everybody don't have the same abilities. And there's some things that you would expect folks can do that they may not be able to do. If it's training, education, or some issue that you can help resolve, then you need to take that on. I believe as a leader that my number one job was to help every person that I could reach their fullest potential. It was never about me. It was about them. And you'd be amazed at what people will do for you when they know that they can trust you, respect you, and you care about them.
You mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King in your book as well, and you've spoken and written and appeared on days of Dr. King's birthday. What is it about him you can share with us that impressed you?
It's the leadership in doing the right thing. Even though he faced jail, beat up, whatever, he was trying to make a difference in society, and he did. It's that having the tenacity to do the right thing, even though you may have some physical harm in the process.
Before I go to questions, and we're looking for any students or general public, please come up to our microphones so you can ask the general your question in the time that we have allotted for that. Come up right now. We're going to go to you in a moment from anywhere in our audience, please. In the meantime, I want to ask you about veterans, which has been, veterans have been very important to you. We're so grateful you would come here today and be with us for the President's event that we had. But you've also said that we still are not doing enough. Is it the way that we're handling healthcare still? What is it we're not doing that we should be doing?
I think the responsiveness to some of the healthcare issues needs to be addressed, or continue addressing them. We've got a lot of veterans and families that are hurting. They're hurting because of PTSD, homelessness. So there is a lot more that society can do in a lot of places to improve the lives of veterans, those that have served and now are not able to serve for illness. I'm the chairman of the board of Endeavors. It used to be Family Endeavors. Endeavors focuses on veterans and families with PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and homelessness. About a year ago, we opened a home in Fayetteville, North Carolina for single lady females with children that didn't have a place to stay, who were homeless. We have a home there for male veterans who are homeless. And I went over to the male house. There were 5 veterans living there, homeless. And there was a 73-year-old gentleman that I met. And he just kind of followed me around for about 30 minutes to tell me that he was so glad that he would have a home for Thanksgiving. This guy had been living in the woods for 30 days, had a bad case of pneumonia, was about dead. The VA kind of got him back on his feet, but when they discharged him, he didn't have any place to go. He was still homeless. So we took him in that home, and he's there. We've got, in San Antonio, we've got homes for families, females and males with children who are homeless. We've got a male house there. We've got a gentleman, a veteran, that's been living in it for 20 years. He comes to the board meetings. Matter of fact, he's on the board. Every month he'll come and say, "I'm tell you about what we're doing now. You need to come see." And he has no intentions of moving. He told me a couple of months ago, he said, "Well, you know, General, I'm going to die right there in that house, Fairweather Lodge." I said, "Well, we all going to die someplace, but I hope you don't do it there."
Wow.
But
The budget was what, 70 billion at one point?
no, when I was the budget director, it was 170 billion.
170 billion.
Yep.
Let's come over here. Question for General Flowers. Please tell us your first name and your field of study and your year of study here at Embry-Riddle.
My name is William. What was the second?
Your field of study here at Embry-Riddle, I'm sorry.
I'm a business administration student, and I'm a senior, graduating, hopefully graduating in May.
All right.
Good for you.
Well, I can tell you that I just came back from a Caribbean Students Association conference. We basically spoke on race. We spoke on a number of different things. I'm not Caribbean. However, I do take an interest in joining and having a general unity for people who are categorized as black racially in the United States. And understanding your background, that you worked in the corporate sector, you've worked in the government, you worked in the military. What is it that you see specifically that is either lacking or is either needing or just needing improvement within the black community so that you can have, so that there is greater racial equality?
I think in the African American community, there are still some schools that are not up to par. But you know, when I talk to young folks like you, I tell them, don't focus on the way it is. Think about the way it can be with you. And don't ever let poverty or anything of that nature determine what you do as an individual. Now, I'm an African American, been African American all my life, I'm going to die that way. But I believe that people are people. We ought to get off color and ethnicity and some of this craziness that we've been hung up on for a lot of years. I respect all people, and I don't care what they look like, as long as they're good people, have integrity, want to be trained and led, they work for me. So, you know, I respect the fact that you're wanting to do things in the African American community, but there are a lot of other communities out there also. And the United States is one big community.
We're looking for others to come up to ask their questions of General Flowers. What about women in the Air Force? Are there more opportunities for women?
Absolutely. Every career field is open to women now, to ladies. The Air Force composition is about 26% female. And we've got females flying in combat. We got females special operators. We just graduated the first lady E6 pilot last year. She's flying drones from Nellis Air Force Base, doing some wonderful work in some serious places. I think, let me tell you, I think women might be smarter than men. My experience with women in the workplace as professional has been very, very good. Now, where we get hung up sometime and get ourselves confused is because sometimes ladies are aggressive, sometimes men are aggressive, and some men can't take the aggressiveness of ladies. But you know, my thinking is you just need to get over it. If the person's smarter than you, then learn from them.
Your question now for General Flowers.
Hi, I'm Dave.
Dave.
Sophomore and Homeland Security major. I was just wondering, with your vast amount of military experience, what's the one piece of advice that you wish you were given, just going into the Air Force in general, that you would give now?
Yeah, I wish that I knew what I was getting into, and so that I could have better prepared. So what I tell young folks now is it's all about attitude. If you come in with the right attitude, learn everything you can, do the best that you can every day at whatever you do, you'll be amazed at what will happen for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Over here, your question.
Good evening, General.
Hi.
My name is Patrick, and I am Aviation Business Administration, and I am a senior here in Embry-Riddle. My question for you is, you've been serving here for about 2 generations now. From your experience, what do you see would be the biggest challenge for my generation coming up to the service?
Well, the biggest challenge for you is, in your generation, is going to be the technological changes that continue to occur. Are you going to be a pilot, or are you a pilot already?
No, sir. I'm actually going to be logistics officer.
Oh, logistics officer. Well, you know, one of your challenges might be not having enough logistics to be a good officer and do what you need to do. You know, sometimes, and we're there right now with the services, we've got old, dilapidated equipment, and you know, in the Air Force, we've got airplanes that we're still flying that will be 80 years old when they go out of the inventory, B-52s. You know, and we got aircraft that the average age of airplanes in the Air Force is probably about 35 years old, and that includes the new stuff that we're buying. So the technological changes that will come with all that stuff and growth will be a challenge for you logistically, because one of the things that that military doesn't do, and I found it in industry, you know, in industry you'd save every dollar you can, because the CEO and the president want to see the bottom line every month and the retained earnings piece of the financial statement, because that's theirs. But sometimes we don't modernize when we should. And we take old legacy stuff and hang new stuff on it and just grind it down to a stop. Your biggest challenge is going to be keeping those folks that support you informed and helping them to understand what it is that you need as a logistics person in order to do the mission and to be a mission enabler.
Thank you.
Thank you.
General?
All the best to you.
Did you ever envision that B-52s would stay in service as long as they have?
No, after we slept them about the fifth time, I thought, well, we're done. But for those of you that don't understand, SLEP is an acronym for Service Life Extension Program. And we put new engines on them, we put new wings on them, we put new avionics in them, we did all kinds of things. And they are now programmed to go out of the inventory in 2050 or something.
Wow.
Another 30 years. Yeah.
Right over here, your question for the General.
Hi, good evening, General. My name is Joshua. I am a computer science major, junior. I'm going to graduate in December of 2020. I wanted to ask you, as a leader, how do you deal with adversity and adapting to change in if things don't necessarily go your way? How do you adapt to
Adversity or diversity? Which one did you say? Adversity? How do we deal with adversity? Well, you know, as a leader, first of all, you got to understand the facts behind what you're labeling adversity. And you won't ever have everybody that will agree with you and what you think is right. There will and that's a good thing, because folks will help you check yourself, because you don't want a lot of yes people around you. You want people that will tell you what you need to know, not what you want to hear. I think the way that I deal with adversity is, first I try to get the facts and understand what I'm dealing with. And then if it's something that I can fix, I'll fix it. If it's something that I can't fix, we find the resources that exist someplace to help. But the last thing that you want to do when you have adversity is cut someone's head off and say, well, we can fix this by getting rid of you. Well, you might be getting rid of something you need. You don't ever get rid of something you need until you get something to replace it.
sir?
We have time for a few more questions from the audience. Anybody want to come down, feel free to ask your question of the General, and then the General will sign copies of his book. You know, I want to come back to integrity.
Yes, sir.
Was there a role model as you were coming up through the ranks that impressed you and said, you know, I'm going to take a little of what this one does, because you had women commanders as well. Can you tell us who helped shape the integrity part of your life?
Coming up in the military as an enlisted person, the person that helped shape me was a tech sergeant that I met the first night in basic training. Yeah, I'll never forget him. His name was Tech Sergeant Rainey. And he got on the bus with all of us recruits and he says, welcome to Lackland Air Force Base. I'm going to be your everything. Your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, you belong to me. And I said, oh, I didn't realize that. But, but I did shortly thereafter. And, you know, that's when I made up my mind that, you know what, I can do this. It isn't going to always be the way I want it to be, but I can do it, and when I leave, it's going to be different. This is for 12 weeks at that time, and most folks can do a lot of things over 12 weeks, or in 12 weeks.
I think in the book, you advise people who are thinking of coming into this service, regardless of the branch, talk to other people who are in that branch of the service,
yep,
and find out what you're getting into.
Yep, absolutely. And there are so many opportunities and avenues to do that today. I try to impress upon young folks that you ought not to be shy of officers. You ought not to be shy of senior leaders, civilians. You know, they're human just like you are. And if you carry yourself in a dignified, professional manner, there aren't many that won't talk to you and give you advice and be a good mentor for you. So you got to seek out mentors, And the mentors got to know that they can trust you and you're sincere, but not wasting their time. And you'll be amazed at how much help you can get out there.
Elizabeth Truax,
Ah.
Captain,
Who is she?
tonight, right over here. She's here with her family. You mentored Elizabeth Truax.
She mentored me.
That's what you said earlier. You said that. I'm like, how did that work out?
Yeah, Elizabeth and I showed up in the Pentagon in 2009 together. And what a phenomenal officer and a great lady. I would follow her off a cliff.
When she called, you said,
When she called, I said, you know, I got to go. I called her Saturday morning, I guess it was. And I said, Elizabeth, if I had talked to you yesterday, I would be telling you that I'm not coming because I've got a knee that I can't bend. It needs replacing. But then Saturday night I went to bed and I said, don't have a choice. I got to go.
yeah.
Sunday morning I got up and came. You just got to, your word is your bond. When you promise somebody something, you got to deliver. If you can't deliver, don't promise it. Because it's, they learn not to trust you or respect you when you don't do what you say.
You have letters from, what, 4 presidents?
5.
5 presidents.
All of the living presidents, when I retired in 2012, I got a personal signed letter from them. I think both Bushes,
President Carter?
Carter, Bushes, Clinton, and there was one more. But yeah, all the living presidents. Carter, yeah. We named Carter.
You were hoping to meet President Obama. You went to the White House. You had the meal, you had all the trappings of the White House, but you didn't get to meet the
We
president?
didn't get to meet the president. He was in the West Wing that day, but he didn't come into his own dining room. The closest we got to him was Valerie Jarrett, who was a special assistant to the president. But that was probably one of the most awesome experiences I've ever had. To take my family, sit down in the presidential dining facility in the West Wing of the White House and be treated like we belonged there. It was pretty incredible.
This is my 10th year at Embry-Riddle, and one of the hallmarks of the students is their discipline. Discipline is a hallmark for Major General Flowers. Did you acquire that in the military, or did you come into the military with the discipline needed?
No, I think I acquired the discipline, some of it in the military. But you know, discipline you start learning as a child. And you develop it over the years and you get better and better at it as you go. I started working with the adults when I was 10 years old. And at age 16, in the country in North Carolina, they didn't have contract bus drivers like we have today as civilians. The students transported the other students to and from school. So at age 16, I was driving a bus that carried 42 students, and I would take them to school every day and bring them back in the morning. So I learned responsibility very quickly.
How old were you when you were driving that bus?
16.
Wow.
16 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
So when I came into the military, I knew what it meant to be responsible and accept responsibility and do the right thing.
You know, living in San Antonio, the Chamber of Commerce noticed you, and for a time you were doing something with them, weren't you?
Yeah, I am. My wife tells me that I failed that retirement and I need to stop doing so much, but I serve on 6 foundations and 1 board. Air Force Aid Society, Fisher House, Endeavors, Arnold Air Society, Master Leadership San Antonio, and there's a paid board that I serve on also. So I meet myself coming and going just about every day.
We got one more pass around the room. If anyone would like to, please come up to the microphone and ask your question of the general. Then we'll have our book signing. Good evening, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Yes, sir.
Bob, obviously, I'm not a student here.
If you could get closer to the microphone, sir.
Hi,
Thank
my name is Bob. Obviously, I'm not a student here, but my grandson is. Like the general, I'm also a Vietnam veteran and served there during the Tet Offensive. What are your views on our involvement there after all these years later?
Say that again?
Your views on Vietnam, all
What are
the
your views
on
after
Vietnam?
all these years later of our involvement there?
You know, when I think about Vietnam, I put it in the perspective of 58,000 people lost. And a lot of those people I helped move that were dead. I think the intentions of Vietnam were good, but we kind of lost focus and got a lot of people killed. That's why we're so concerned today when we think about going to do battle or take somebody on. The first thing that the senior leaders will ask is, how do we get out? And if you don't know how you're going to get out, you probably don't want to get in, because getting in and not being able to get out means somebody will probably bring you out.
When you were in Vietnam, was that during General Westmoreland's time?
Yes.
How was he as a leader?
Oh, I don't know. I was a 3-striper and a 4-striper at the time. And, you know, my bosses, I was about 15 tiers down from General Westmoreland. But, you know, the ones that my immediate leaders and supervisors, they were good. They all understood where we were and what was going on. And we were in combat, and tomorrow you may not be here.
General Colin Powell was here in Daytona Beach a few years ago. You were very active at that time. What was he like in your impression?
General Powell is one of my heroes. He was one of our guest speakers at Joint Forces School in Norfolk in 1989. He was a 1-star at that time. And I have never been more impressed with a general officer than I was with General Powell. He's an amazing man.
In the audience, ma'am, good evening.
Yes, hi.
Hi, ma'am.
Major General Flowers. It is such a pleasure for me to sit here and listen to you. But I think one of the most important things that I would take from this interview tonight is you spoke about sharecropping. I don't know an awful lot about that, but I do know that you must have went through hell. And then for you to be able to go ahead and do what you've done in life, not alone is it a great honor for you, but it just goes to show you what you can do in this magnificent country of ours. And regardless of who you are, where you come from, there's a road. And I was nowhere near what you've done, but I also came to this country when I was very young. And I could go on for the next 2 hours telling you and the audience what I got out of this country. It was just unbelievable. I'm not saying that everyone is going to be like that or get the opportunities, and maybe today it might be just as difficult, but it really, really, when I listen to you, my imagination brings me back to when you were a young person, the most wonderful things that you accomplished. And I just wanted to get up and say congratulations, and what a pleasure it is to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You know, when I get those kind of comments, my response is, I had a lot of help. It's not about me. I had a lot of help. And the reason I had so much help is because I tried to do the right thing and treat people the right way. If you take care of people, they'll take care of you. If you don't take care of them, they're going to take care of you anyway. You just won't enjoy it as much. You're going to be taken care of if you're a leader. So thank you, ma'am.
We have one more question.
My name's Jackson. I'm that grandson. So as a future airman myself, my question is, what do you want to see out of your future airmen? What do you want to see out of that next generation?
I want to see leaders that take on the role of leaders and step up and get her done. You know, you are the future in your generation. Pretty soon it will be in your capable hand, because old guys like me will be passed on or gone or wherever. But you are the future of the Air Force. So make the best of every day. Learn everything you can. Treat everybody as well, like human beings, and you'll be amazed at how far you'll go. You're welcome.
Before we conclude, what is it you miss about being in the service?
I miss the people. That's what I miss the most. You know, we were talking earlier this evening. I don't miss the 5 tours in Washington at all. Matter of fact, when I go back there, I got to make sure I have a round-trip ticket so I can get back to Texas. But I really miss the people. And you know, industry, the corporate world is, excuse me, time to take my Eloquist. I've got an alarm to go off. The corporate world is interesting and it's very dynamic, but I didn't find the camaraderie and the kind of help and willingness and motivation in the corporate world that we had in the military. But it's all good. We learn every day from both of them. And there are a lot of corporations that want military people to come work for them because of the discipline and their focus. We hired a lot of military in my company, but there's a downside to that. A lot of the military folks were older, and they didn't take well to the young millennials. And I used to spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand that they're not like you. They're smarter than you. You need to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good advice. Do you still stay in touch with people that you serve with?
Absolutely.
I know you've got your son, and he lives on with your work.
Absolutely. I stay in touch with a lot of folks that I serve with. I talk to somebody just about every week, sometimes more than once a week that I serve with. And I have some help with that because all these giving back organizations that I'm affiliated with, most of them are veterans and family related. So a lot of the folks that I served with are running these organizations. For instance, this afternoon I had a conversation with the CEO of the Air Force Aid Society. And we were just talking about Embry-Riddle. And he asked me, did you meet Dr. Butler? And I said, yeah, you can't miss him. He's got the presence of a president. And John Hopper, Dr. Butler, he was here. But yeah, people like that, I stay in touch with them.
Good for you.
And
Thank
I
you.
still learn from them.
Thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you.
I want to thank Corey and Nell for working with us tonight, and Tony Petrol for producing. That concludes our series for this spring. Enjoy your summer, and we hope to see you back in the fall when the Embry-Riddle Speaker Series resumes.
Thank you, Mark.
General.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.